Hey, Guru Nation, welcome back. It's been a while since Chris and I have done a good old-fashioned podcast. I just noticed that my lighting, Chris, happens to be lime green. So it's not the natural one. I just looked at it now, actually.
It
It's
doesn't
uh,
look bad.
it's lime green. But we haven't done a podcast in a while, so welcome to all the viewers and listeners. By the way, Chris, you may not know this either. Did you know that from the people watching this video, do you know you're a stats guy? You're a stats guy. I got to ask you this. From
Okay.
the people watching this on YouTube right now, don't worry. Shout out to the people listening on podcast. We love you. Subscribe, like, comment. From the people on YouTube, can you guess at random, the person watching this, what percentage are subscribed to my channel? From the people watching this video.
I would guess it's relatively low.
Okay, good. So what would you guess?
15%.
Okay, well, wow. I mean, okay. So Chris is like the wrong guy to play these games with because he knows numbers. The number is 28%. Most people would say 70% are subscribed in. There's no way. How else are they? They're not. 28%. Guys, this is a crime. It's a travesty. We need more subscribers. So make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. We are going to be talking about CRAs today that own sites. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Do they make good site owners? Do they make bad site owners? How does it help them in their CRA work? Is it possible to do both? Is it possible to do both at the same time? I mean, there's a lot. We can open up Pandora's box. So we just had a conference call with a potential client who's a CRA, and we have these regularly. And there's a lot of CRAs. And I'll just start out by saying we have had many clients that were CRAs and still are CRAs that do well as site owners. But we've had more often than not, the CRAs don't do particularly well as site owners, at least initially. Um, I would say at least initially. It's so again, stats. If you were to ask the average person, hey, what percentage do you think like senior CRAs would be successful site owners? I think the expectation would be high, and that number is a lot lower than I think what most people would expect.
So I agree and disagree with your overall premise there. So
We love that. Makes great podcast, Chris.
sure.
You're learning it. You're learning.
So one is I think CRAs have a misconception. They think because they're CRAs and if they're senior CRAs, they think that just means they'll understand everything, right?
Right.
They think they know everything. This will be no issue, this transition from CRA to owning and operating a site. And that can be further from the truth, right? Um, they have to be humble and understand that they don't know what it's like to run a site. And those that are, I think, fare better. Because we have had some very successful CRA clients that do well as a site owner, right? And the ones, at least in my experience, that don't do well is when they don't understand, they don't know what it takes to run a site.
Right. They think, well, I've mastered being a CRA. I'm actually been promoted to senior CRA. So I know research. And nobody's arguing that you know research. But to know research and have a successful site, two different things. I mean, we have
Entirely.
clients, that come out of completely different industries that jump in and do really good and know very little about research when they start out, right?
Yep.
And they learn as they go. So I think there's a lot of advantages to not maybe not understanding or not being as experienced, because the problem with CRAs, especially experienced CRAs, you are so you have a lens on and you see clinical research through that lens. And if you've never been a study coordinator, you're literally wearing like whatever color glasses you want to say you're wearing. you're seeing like just what CRAs see. And at the end of the day, what they're doing reports. And who are they dealing with? They're dealing with the coordinator, the PI, but primarily with their project manager, their lead, and the sponsor. So the job, the deliverables of a CRA is not at all similar in any way to the deliverable of a site owner.
No.
Right.
I mean, what's your responsibility in terms of a sponsor at site level, operating a site, right? It's one, there is a similarity, and that's the data, right? But that's not the primary focus that a sponsor has towards the site, right? It's give me the numbers. I want the patients, right? And getting those numbers, those patients as a site owner, it's nothing you've experienced as a CRA,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or generating revenue, right?
Right.
Or getting studies, right? These are not things you've dealt with as a CRA. What you have dealt with as a CRA is the data, right? Which you can
Another
translate over.
exactly related to, just to add on to what you said, because I completely agree. This is rare where I completely agree, although lately it's been more common. CRAs, they they're not incentivized to think outside the box in their job, right? You're actually disincentivized to think outside the box. You're sure you may have a problem site, maybe you have some like creative way for them to, get back on track. But at the end of the day, you're not deviating from your report. That's the structure you follow. Well, when you're a site owner, you're dealing with, let's say in your first year, 4 studies, completely different patient population, maybe, completely different new sets of challenges. You have
Completely
to
different sponsors that
completely
both have
different
their own rules.
sponsors. Yeah, you have to think differently. You can't be too structured. And if you're too rigid and not willing to deviate from your norms, like your preconceived ideology of what research is through your lenses as a CRA, you're going to refuse to do this stuff. And you and I talk to you more than me now when they're clients. You talk to these CRAs all the time, and they're like, well, I'm not going to be the one telling the PI this or telling the coordinator. It's usually something having to do with sales or persuasion that they tend to avoid, because as a CRA, you don't really do much of that other than trying to persuade your CRC to answer a query or something.
Right.
All
Right.
right.
Yep.
So it's a different skill set just because, and I tell the CRAs, I didn't tell this last one because you did all the talking, most of the talking. Thank you for that. But I usually tell them, it's not a guarantee that you're going to be successful just because you're a CRA. Matter of fact, the odds are slightly against you from my anecdotal evidence. Slightly against you.
Again, I think it boils down to the individual. Both
Right.
both examples that you've used, right? CRA
Mm-hmm.
boils down to the individual, or this person coming from left field out of a completely different industry. I think again it boils down to the individual.
Right.
Can you be humble? Can you understand that you don't know everything? And there's going to be a learning curve for you, right?
Yes.
I think when they're coming from left field, they already know this going in, right? Because they haven't worked in the industry. They know there's a learning curve. They know they have to put in the time and the effort, right? And
Yes.
sometimes CRAs don't see it that way. I don't need to put in the time and the effort. I already know everything.
There you go. And that's a perfect segue, because I'm going to say we've talked about skill set, or the willingness to adapt your skill set is kind of what we've been discussing so far. CRAs, I wouldn't say for the most part, but many tend to lack the flexibility of changing their skill set, evolving their skill set to match the requirements of a site owner. But the other thing we got to talk about is the time they have available, because
Mhm.
that's a huge negative against them as well. Uh, if you're a CRA, first of all, you're getting paid good money, um, great money when you're experienced, good when you're starting out. You're getting paid good to great money, but you're exchanging like literally part of your life for this, because you have deadlines, you're traveling, you're on site, you're doing reports, you revision, you're doing it again. You're not going to have time for a site, right?
Well, we do advise CRAs when we speak with them to continue working as a CRA, right?
Right.
Until it's successful.
Right.
So this is a hurdle you need to overcome as a
Right.
CRA, right?
Right.
How do you dedicate enough time towards your new business, right? A
Right.
research, right? And maintain your work and your life as a CRA, right? It's difficult, but you
Yeah.
need to balance that somehow.
No, I agree. It's a liability is all I'm saying, because you don't have the time that somebody who's just comes from a different industry and is willing to just be the coordinator. You don't have that ability as a CRA, because you're not going to have time to be the coordinator until you quit your job. So now you have to be a manager, right?
Mhm.
Of a coordinator. And we can go back to the first thing we talked about, skill set. Managing is a very different type of skill set. If you've been a CRA, maybe you were managing other CRAs, that would be an asset in your case. But if you were just a senior CRA, not in charge of other employees, you're you're in uncharted territory once again for yourself. Now you have to be managing staff, which you maybe never have done, right? So that's another liability, in my opinion. The Let's talk about why CRAs could be good owners, though. I don't like to be too negative. So there's a lot of reasons why you guys should be good.
And we know a number of them that have been very successful and are very successful as site owners, right?
Right.
Um,
Did
I can
it
think,
have any of them quit? The ones that are our clients, have any of them quit their job as CRA?
oh yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, you know of one in Texas.
Oh, okay. Okay. I wasn't aware that they quit.
You know of another in Georgia. She's no longer a client though. The one in
Okay.
Texas is still a client.
So they're out there. They're out there. It's not like they all fail. You guys can succeed. You just have to. So, what's the reasons for the ones that were successful? What are the reasons why you think they succeeded?
Again, I think that they were somewhat humble in the fact that it's different being a site owner than being a CRA. I don't know everything. There's going to be a learning curve here. Um, and I think both the two that I can think of that are successful site owners understand that, right? Um, do you know the one in Georgia? She was a client for about a year.
No, but don't try to give me hints, because I don't want to reveal the identity. But I really don't. I was trying to think who it is, but I can't remember. You'll tell me after.
Okay. Anyhow, man, I think she was a female in Georgia. She was humble and quite successful now. Very successful now.
Okay. Now I'm curious. Now I gotta wait till we're done recording so I could.
Surprised you don't know who it is. It's probably because you're tired.
Maybe because I'm on like just a few hours of sleep today.
That's gotta be it. You're
Okay, but
used to it
what?
very
So
quick.
what made them? What made her and the others? What are some common traits? You said humility. Um,
I think that's the big ask, right? If you're going to transition from a CRA to a site owner, I think you have to understand, well, there's two parts, right? One, you have to find the time, or you have to have the resources to hire people to do what you can't do. Because what's the transition like from a CRA to a business owner, a site owner?
but
Uh,
even resources to hire, you still need to carve out time, because you need to manage them, or else who knows
yeah,
what's gonna happen.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the person that still work with, we're consultant, right, for this client in Texas. Um, I mean, he has a family. He was missing out on his family doing both. So he eventually had to make a choice, right? Which is it? Which am I going to do? Am I going to give up being a site owner, or am I going to give up being a CRA? Because it was too taxing on it to do both.
Right. That's actually a perfect segue. You're hitting all the segues. So how long is it possible to do both? Number one, that's the practical question. And then number two, we're going to get into gray territory. We're not Chris and I, we're not here to judge anyone.
Mhm.
Whatever, allows you to sleep at night. But how ethical is it to be a CRA? And I imagine most don't tell their employer, hey, I'm starting a site on the side. So I want to document that with HR. No, you're not, you're not really doing that, but it could cause problems. And we've seen some
Yep.
problems.
Yeah.
So can you answer those two parts, and then I'll give my take after you?
Sure. So, yeah, I don't think this is something you're going to want to reveal unless you absolutely have to as part of your contract,
Yeah.
which I don't think it is, right? I don't think anybody has signed a contract with their employer that, hey, if you're going to start a site, you need to make us aware of this. Or maybe it is in their contract.
No, there's usually the contracts would say competing businesses. And then that's where the interpretation comes in, and this is why lawyers make good money. They can try to argue for or against that breach.
Yeah, this is why I just don't think you want to tell your employer, because you're in no way competing with your employer, right?
Right.
If your employer is a CRO, there's no way your single site's competing with the CRO, right? You're not after the same business.
Right.
There's just no way. But as you just said or alluded to, your attorneys get involved, they can make any argument, right? And you just
Yeah.
don't want that you don't want to have to bear that burden, right? So this is not something you're going to want your employer to know about.
They can make a mountain out of a molehill. That's a fitting expression for this.
Yeah, exactly. So if I were a CRA and I was going to continue working as a CRA and I wanted to start this side business, there's just no way I'm telling my employer. So you do run into potential problems with not telling your employer, right? And the biggest problem is, what if you get awarded a study in which your employer and your employer's, either a CRO or a sponsor, and your employer is the one either overseeing that study as a CRO or is directly awarding that study as a sponsor.
And you know what, Chris, to tie it into current events, because this is July 2021 for those watching in the future. Hello, future people. Hopefully we're okay as a society. Consolidation of the CROs is making it even more likely.
That you would
If
be
you go from
awarded.
if you go from like big CROs to 3,
Mhm.
now you have less opportunity to hide. And I mean, it's very possible we can get to like 1 or 2 major CROs because they all merged. And that's another podcast. But point is, it's gonna happen at some point. Hopefully, it's not the same team, because if it is, then you got to disclose it. And we've had clients where this has happened to them. And good thing is, if you're an experienced CRA, you can go work somewhere else, right? You're in demand. You're a high ticket item, but a very sought after one.
2021 for those watching in the future.
What's
And you
what's
have
that?
change then, right? You high demand right now, certainly.
Yes.
And there's times in which there's not as much of a demand. So who knows what happens in the future, but certainly there's a high demand now.
And that's another great point. Why you want to start a site is because you want to have diversity of your career. You want to be in business for yourself, because what if CRA work dries up? Well, at least you have a site. And yeah, if CRA work dries up, the logic is site work should dry up too. But it's not always like linearly correlated. You may find a niche where it's actually growing, right? It's more options. It's more options at the end of the day, which is
But
always a good thing.
I would tend to lean towards it is linear related in terms of if you're
Sure,
starting up as a CRA, most likely there's not as much in the way of research studies being awarded to sites.
fair enough. I doubt it's 1-to-1 though. I mean, it's not going to be equal. Somebody got to do the math, but
But I do agree with you. I do. There's a number of reasons to start your own site, and yes, diversity is good in terms of not being 100% reliant upon one business, right? One I don't know how to word it, but as you said, right?
One stream of income, one skill set,
Exactly.
one
Thank you.
career. Right.
But it's
Exactly right.
also because CRAs burn out, right? I mean,
There you go.
that's why you want to start a site.
You struck a nerve because that is a theme. You know, and you and I talk to these people all the time. They say, hey, you know what? I'm sick of like working. I go to sites all the time. I see it's nothing special what they do. It's just a clinic with a doctor, and they do research and they do very well. So I want to do that. So the temptation is to start looking at greener pastures. But let me tell you, entrepreneurship, because when you start a site, even though it's basically a commodity at the end of the day, you're a business owner. And like we said, to open up this podcast, a very different skill set and mentality required and attitude required than being a CRA who does whatever they can to please the superior. That's we know some of those CRAs like that too. They're probably not going to make good site owners because they're not used to thinking on their feet. They're used to just doing what they're told. As a site owner, you're not going to be told anything. Nobody's telling you anything what to do outside of a sponsor telling you what the protocol is. But as far as running your business, you're supposed to tell yourself what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, is that everything we wanted to cover? We talked about a little bit of ethical issues. We talked about why they're not going to be successful. Then we made it positive by talking about why they will be successful. And this is the beauty of life, guys. You choose if you want to be successful or not. You choose. Go ahead and choose. But it's not like The Secret where you just think of it and it happens. Choose, but that means making the necessary adjustments to your mentality, your skill set, and all those other things.
So I would say everything that we kind of touched on, it was very briefly. The one item, at least in my mind, if I were a CRA, that I would want us to expand on would be how much time do I have to dedicate to my site and how long can I work and do both, right? Again, we only touched on it all of everything we talked about. It was just brief. But again, if I were a CRA, that would be my primary focus, right?
And that's a fair question because you're probably burnt out already as a CRA. So now you're just going to add more stressful work to it by being a site owner. It's pretty damn stressful, especially in the beginning.
Yep.
So now you're burning both ends of the candle. Something's got to give. Either you're going to fail miserably, which if you're an experienced CRA, even if you fail miserably at your current job or at your site, someone else is going to hire you anyways. So that's another asset you have in your back pocket. You should have more confidence than others. But yeah, why don't you answer how does this whole time management thing work for people who have no time as it is? How are you going to add more magical hours to this?
So I would guess a typical CRA is working, the average CRA is probably working 60 hours a week. Would you say that's a fair guess?
Easy.
Well, I think when you're starting out as a CRA, you're working more. And as you gain experience, you work less.
Yes, this is true.
Either it's because of who you're working with, they value you, they want to keep you so they're not overburdening you.
Yep.
Or you've learned how to manage your what's required to be a CRA, right?
Yeah.
The tasks. And so you're able to cut down on the time it takes.
There's an inflection point where your experience as a CRA switches from the sponsor or your line manager trying to maximize ROI from every possible hour of your existence to they want to keep you long term. There's an inflection point somewhere around like year 5 where that switches.
Yep, I would agree. So I think 60 hours is a fair guess that the average CRA is working.
Yeah, that's fair.
Some probably less, some probably more, but let's run with the 60. So if you're already working 60, you've already got quite the workload, right?
Yeah, you're already working more than the average person at 40.
Right. So I would guess for a while, you can do what's needed to do with your site and add 10 hours to that workload. If you can add 10 hours, right, you can do what's needed to be done.
10 hours a week.
Yep. So
Okay.
if you can do that, if you can add that 10 hours somewhere, you can fit that into your schedule, you're probably good. The problem starts when you start to actually generate revenue at your site. So initially you're not generating revenue. You can probably add even 5 hours. We'll get the tasks that need to get done.
Right.
5 to 10 hours a week, right?
Okay.
And that's probably going to be sufficient for somewhere around 6 months.
Yes.
But that's
You're actually spot on. I mean, it's pretty accurate. As you were saying that, I'm thinking about my new site here, our new site here in Arizona, where I'm gonna be at least initially, doing everything, right? And I also happen to be a CRA. I definitely don't do 60 hours a week of CRA work, but I think when you add up all my work hours in the week, I'm easily at 60. You know, with the podcast, with everything, like I'm at 60. Um, Now I'm supposed to add more to my own. And we're at the stage that you just explained. We're not making revenue. So I can reply to an email from a sponsor like at midnight. You know, it's within 24 hours, but it's midnight. That's when I have time. Like, hey, I'm checking my emails. Boom. I got that out of the way. I can get away with that now, setting up teleconference for like a pre-SSV. I can get away with that now. But when patients start coming in, that's when it starts getting harder.
So you have a number of others that you can rely on though. So it's not a fair comparison. What the CRA that we're talking about, this hypothetical CRA, and they're 5 to 10 hours, you're probably getting away with an hour or two.
Well, shameless plug, I use our own services
and me, which I'm able to help out.
I'm basically a client of DSCS.
Right.
Like if I cloned myself, I'm a client in this case. And I'm using the infrastructure, and it saves me. Actually, I didn't intend for this to be an infomercial, but you brought it up. Good point.
Sure.
Saves me time. I would have to be doing clinicaltrials.gov. I barely have the time as it is to reply to the leads Julie sends me. First, I got to look through, okay, which one's appropriate, which one's not. Maybe text the PI, can you do this one? No. Okay, what about this one? No. This is what I've been doing this week. With this one, yes. Okay, let me email this one. That's taking like at least that alone's like an hour a week right there. Right. So it's saving me time because that might have been like 10 hours that week for me to
do all that's the 5 to 10 hours. Now you cut it down to an hour.
Like an hour, maybe even 30 minutes, who knows? But it's saving me a lot of time.
Right. So anyhow, whether it's an hour, 30 minutes, or 10 hours, you're going to be able to do that as a CRA. Or you're going to have to do that for probably or approximately 6 months, right? Until you start generating revenue. You have a study, you're seeing patients. And even before that,
6 to 9 months. I think it's 6 to 9.
Right.
Closer to 9.
Okay. Well, even if it's not,
it makes it extra hard for the CRAs because that's 9 months of like working two 80-hour-a-week jobs, and one of them no revenue. One of them might be money out of your pocket.
A little bit. Well, depending on the route you go, right?
That's right.
If you're renting a facility, right?
Yeah.
That's dead fish there, right? There's nothing's happening good for you.
At least in our case here in Arizona, there's no money really coming out. It's just right now, it's, we got a good PI, we got a sweet deal. Eventually we'll be a partnership for sure. But yeah, and by the way, I set up that call for Monday. I don't know if you saw.
I did.
Okay.
Well,
there's a study might be our first study.
Okay.
So anyways.
Okay. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. They said yes, which says a lot about the industry right now.
Right.
So yeah, let's end with that. Positive. Sponsors need sites. If you can bring on doctors or clinicians who see real world patients, you are doing the industry a service. The industry needs you. There's there's these established sites that like to say, we don't need more sites. That's nonsense. We do need more sites because we need more patients. When the number of studies is like less than 10% of studies are behind on enrollment instead of 90, maybe you have an argument we don't need more sites. Right now, it's 90% of studies are behind on enrollment.
Oh,
What do
yeah,
you need? You need more patients. How are you going to get them? You need more clinicians and more sites.
sure.
Bottom line.
But I know you want to end this, but
I don't want to, and
end.
we can go as long as you
Sure.
want. I'll turn my
Okay.
light from green to red if we have to.
Right.
That's
So,
subliminal.
but at some point, you have, as a CRA, at some point, you have to make a decision, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's not necessarily true because you could, wow, I'm liking the lighting.
I'm gonna change it. I'm playing
So-
around with the new studio setup.
So to finish, what I'm sure the CRAs, or at least most, are questioning, right? Can I do this? Can I be a CRA and can I own a site, right? Sure. If you have enough money, you can do anything you want, right? If you have enough money to throw at your site, right, and the correlated expenses, you can do whatever you want. But if you're going to run on a shoestring budget, at some point you have to make a choice. Am I going to continue being a CRA or am I going to be a
Yeah.
site owner? Right. And I
You
would
think
say
it could
that
last forever? You think it can last forever?
doing both? No.
Like maybe a contract CRA? Like where you
maybe,
don't do that often? Like
yeah, maybe that you could probably do. You could do both.
yeah.
But if you're going to have a successful site, you're going to have oversight of your site, right? Even if you hire the greatest person, you're still going to have to do something for your site, right? Some things for your site. Because if you just hire a coordinator, which you're going to eventually do, most CRAs, they start out as the coordinator, which we recommend they do, right? Because there's not much work involved, right? It's just a matter of answering emails, being there for site selection visits. But at some point, you're going to grow your site enough that if you're going to continue being the coordinator, you're going to have to quit being a CRA, or
Right.
you're going to have to hire somebody to be the coordinator at your site.
Right.
So you're going to have to either stop being a CRA or you're going to have to invest in your site,
Right.
financially.
Right. And like you said, even if you quit CRA altogether and now you're 100% coordinator, right? There will come a time when if you want to grow the business, you need to quit being a CRC too
Yep.
at your site in order to grow the business.
Yep.
So you're always going to be, that's the thing. I guess we could start and end, we bookend this podcast with you're always going to be having to adapt. And that's probably something that CRAs don't have to do very much of in their day job, which is why it could be dangerous to assume you're going to be successful just because you're Mr. or Mrs. CRA of the year.
Yeah.
First of all, no
completely.
one even cares. And second of all, might be working in your disadvantage, or you might be at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I would completely agree. You do not have to adapt much as a CRA.
Right.
Unless you're kind of expanding as a CRA out into different specialties, then of course there's some adaptation that happens there. But if you're just running the same studies over and over, right? You're in this one specialty, that's all you do. There's no adaptation as a CRA.
That's right. And that, if you want to be an entrepreneur, is where that's going to be your biggest weakness. The enemy of great is good enough. And
So without a doubt.
what is it as a CRA? It's good enough. It's safe. My money's good. Well, great could be your site makes 7 figures a year for you. Maybe you're spending like 15 hours a week on it, maybe 10. I mean, that's great. You're never going to get away with that being a CRA ever. So that could keep you from, your own comfort zone can keep you from achieving more and better.
Well, if your site's generating 7 figures, you're putting way more than 10 to 15 hours a week into it.
Sure. I know site owners that don't. But they've built it to that point. Yeah, like 10, 15 years into it.
Okay, but they were putting in way more than 10
Of
15 hours
course. They were putting like 100. Yes.
Right.
Yes. But the goal is if you want to, you don't have to put any hours of work at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people try to do that at the beginning. It doesn't work that way, guys.
No, it
I wish.
Yeah.
I wish. I wish.
Right. Yeah.
All right, Chris. Well, I think this was good. Guys, you let us know in the comments what you think. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. And thank you, Chris, for this. And we'll catch you all later. Bye bye.
Thank you.